Why was Elena Martinez running toward danger when every instinct screamed at her to flee? The morning sun painted San Diego's skyline in shades of amber and gold, but Elena saw none of it. Her focus was singular, desperate. Behind her, the black sedan had been trailing for 6 blocks now, its occupants hidden behind tinted glass like predators waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Her breath came in sharp bursts, not from exertion but from the cold reality settling in her chest. This wasn't random. Someone wanted her specifically. Elena had always believed in patterns. As a naval intelligence officer, she'd spent 3 years analyzing satellite imagery, tracking enemy movements, predicting threats before they materialized. But nothing in her training had prepared her for being the target instead of the analyst. The irony wasn't lost on her. She could spot a roadside bomb from 30,000 feet, but she'd missed the signs of her own life unraveling. 3 weeks ago, she'd witnessed something that changed everything. Walking home from her shift at Naval Base Coronado, she'd seen 2 men forcing a young woman into a van downtown. The woman's screams had cut through the evening air like a blade. Without hesitation, Elena had called 911, followed the van for 8 blocks, relayed license plates and descriptions to the dispatcher. Her military training had kicked in automatically. Observe, report, act. What she hadn't known then was that her quick thinking had unraveled an international trafficking network. The FBI told her later that her testimony had led to raids in 7 cities, over 200 victims rescued. But success in the intelligence world often came with a price. And now, that price was hunting her through the streets of her own city. The sedan's engine growled behind her, matching her pace with mechanical precision. Elena's mind raced through options, each one narrowing her chances of survival. The marina ahead was mostly deserted this early. No crowds to blend into, no witnesses to deter whatever these men planned. She could hear her instructor's voice from survival training. When cornered, never give up the initiative. Find allies. Create advantages. Survive by any means necessary. That's when she saw him. 50 yards ahead, a figure in military fatigues knelt beside equipment cases near a concrete barrier. Even at distance, something about his posture radiated competence. The way he held himself spoke of training, discipline, readiness. In that split second, Elena made a choice that would redefine everything she thought she knew about trust, courage, and survival. She ran straight toward the stranger. Her feet pounded against the concrete, each step carrying her away from certain death and toward an uncertain hope. Behind her, car doors slammed. The hunt had begun in earnest now, no more pretense of subtlety. As she closed the distance, she could see him more clearly. Dark hair, intense focus, movements that spoke of special operations training. When he looked up at her approaching footsteps, his eyes held the kind of alertness that came from years of expecting trouble. "Please," Elena gasped as she reached him, pointing back toward the 3 men now advancing from the sedan. "They've been following me. I think I'm in trouble." The transformation in the stranger was immediate. Relaxed focus became combat readiness in a heartbeat. Those alert eyes quickly assessed both Elena and the threat behind her, processing information with trained efficiency. Without speaking, he positioned himself protectively between her and danger, his body language shifting to controlled aggression. "How long have they been following you?" His voice carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to command under pressure. 10 minutes. They've matched every turn, every stop." Elena's voice shook despite her efforts to sound professional. Years of intelligence work, and she'd never been this close to the sharp end of violence. He nodded, never taking his eyes off the approaching men. "I'm Marcus Chen, Navy SEAL Team 5. You did the right thing coming to me." His tone was steady, professional. "Stay behind me and stay calm. We're going to figure out what they want." The 3 men were spreading out as they approached, their movements tactical, coordinated. Elena recognized the pattern from her intelligence training. These weren't street criminals or random predators. This was professional work, executed by people who understood violence as a tool of their trade. "Elena Martinez, one of them called out, his accent thick with Eastern European consonants. The sound of her own name from a stranger's lips sent ice through her veins. How did they know who she was? Marcus's hand moved smoothly toward his sidearm. "Looks like they know you," he said quietly. "Any idea why?" Elena's mind raced backward through recent weeks, searching for connections. The trafficking case. It had to be connected to her testimony. But the scope of what she was facing was only beginning to dawn on her. These men had traveled thousands of miles, organized an operation in a foreign country, all to silence one naval intelligence officer who'd made a phone call. "The trafficking bus 3 weeks ago," she whispered. "I was the witness who broke their operation." Marcus's expression hardened with understanding. "That explains the professional approach. These aren't random criminals. They're here for revenge." The lead man was close enough now that Elena could see his face clearly. A scar ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth, and his eyes held the cold calculation of someone for whom violence was simply business. His companions flanked him with practiced precision, weapons now visible in their hands. "Miss Martinez testified against our business associates," the scarred man said, his English precise despite the accent. "This created significant problems for our organization, problems that require permanent solutions." "Killing a naval officer on American soil," Marcus replied, his voice filled with professional disgust. "Real brave of you." "Not kill, not yet." The man's smile was winter cold. "First, she answers questions, what she told police, what she remembers, who else knows, then maybe we discuss permanent solutions." Elena felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She'd spent her career analyzing threats from the safety of classified briefing rooms. But there was no satellite imagery here, no intelligence reports, no backup teams. Just her, a stranger who'd chosen to help, and 3 men who'd crossed an ocean to destroy her life. Marcus seemed to read her thoughts. "Elena, listen carefully," he said, his voice low but commanding. "These men aren't planning to negotiate. They're not going to let you walk away. Our only option is to stop them here now." "But there are 3 of them," Elena whispered, her intelligence training warring with disbelief at the situation. "I've handled worse odds." Marcus's confidence was absolute, unshakable. "But I need you to trust me completely. When I say move, you move. When I say get down, you hit the ground immediately. Can you do that?" Elena looked at the rifle cases beside Marcus, then at his calm, determined face, then at the 3 armed men who represented everything evil in her world. 3 weeks ago, her biggest concern had been whether her intelligence reports were reaching the right decision-makers. Now she was about to depend on a complete stranger to keep her alive through what looked like an impossible fight. But as she studied Marcus's face, Elena saw something that intelligence training had taught her to recognize. Competence. Not arrogance or bravado, but the quiet confidence of someone who'd been tested under fire and emerged stronger. This man had skills she couldn't begin to understand, experience she'd only read about in classified files. "I can do it," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "Good," Marcus spoke quietly, his words crisp and clear. "In 30 seconds, I'm going to create a distraction. When I do, you run to those concrete barriers behind us and take cover. Keep low, stay hidden, and don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "What kind of distraction?" Elena asked, though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade, the kind that ends this permanently. The scarred man raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Elena. "Enough delay. You come now or we take you." Marcus's response was swift and final. "Over my dead body." What happened next unfolded with a speed that Elena's mind could barely process. Marcus moved like violence incarnate, grabbing something from his equipment case, pulling a pin with his teeth, hurling it toward the 3 men while simultaneously dropping to one knee and raising his primary weapon. The coordination was flawless, the timing perfect. Down, he shouted. Elena hit the concrete behind the barrier just as the world exploded into light and sound. Even with her eyes closed and face pressed against cold concrete, the flashbang grenade lit up everything around her. The noise was overwhelming, a thunderclap that seemed to shake her bones. For several seconds afterward, all she could hear was high-pitched ringing. When her hearing began to return, she could make out shouting, running footsteps, then the sharp, distinctive cracks of gunfire. Elena pressed herself harder against the concrete barrier, clutching the cold stone with white knuckles. The gunfight lasted perhaps 30 seconds, but felt like hours. Different weapons fired, their sounds echoing off the water and nearby buildings. Then suddenly, silence. Elena waited, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might give away her position. She could hear Marcus moving around, his footsteps confident and methodical. No panic, no rush, just professional thoroughness. "Elena," Marcus's voice cut through the quiet. "Stay down for another minute. I need to secure the area." Relief flooded through her like a physical force. He was alive. His voice sounded calm, controlled, nothing like someone who'd just been in a life-or-death gunfight. Elena remained pressed against the concrete, listening as he moved around, checking threats, ensuring safety with trained precision. "Okay," Marcus called after what felt like an eternity. "You can come out now. It's safe." Elena slowly raised her head and peered around the barrier. The scene that greeted her looked like something from a war zone. All three men were down, their weapons scattered nearby. Marcus stood over one of them, checking for signs of life with clinical detachment. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the morning air, mixing with the salt breeze from the harbor. "Are they?" Elena couldn't finish the question. "Two are dead. One's unconscious but stable. He'll survive to face trial." Marcus looked up at her, and she was struck by how normal he seemed, as if single-handedly defeating 3 armed criminals was just another Tuesday morning. "You did good, Elena. Followed instructions, stayed calm, kept yourself safe." Elena slowly stood up, her legs unsteady beneath her. She was still alive. Marcus had kept his word, protected her from men who'd crossed an ocean to destroy her. The magnitude of what had just happened was beginning to settle in her mind. "I can't believe this just occurred," she said quietly. "Believe it, and believe that you're safe now." Marcus was already collecting weapons and checking the unconscious man's pockets with methodical efficiency. "But we need to call this in immediately. The police are going to want detailed statements from both of us." As Marcus spoke, Elena could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had heard the gunfire and called 911. Within minutes, the quiet marina was going to be crawling with police cars, ambulances, federal agents. Her quiet life as an intelligence analyst was about to become front-page news. "Marcus," Elena said quietly, "I need to know something. If something had happened to you during that fight, would I have been able to defend myself?" Marcus paused in his evidence collection and looked at her seriously. "Honestly, I wasn't going to take any chances with your life. Those men came here to hurt you, possibly kill you. If the situation had gone differently, you would have needed to find courage you didn't know you had." The weight of that reality hit Elena like a physical blow. For a few terrifying minutes, her survival might have depended on her willingness to use deadly force. The thought made her feel sick and grateful at the same time. She was alive because a stranger had been willing to risk everything to protect her. But more than that, she was discovering reserves of strength within herself that intelligence school had never taught her existed. Could she have found that courage if it came down to life or death? Elena thought about her years of analyzing threats from a distance, her clinical approach to violence as data points on intelligence reports. But this morning had shown her something different. When violence came for her personally, when evil men crossed an ocean to silence her, she hadn't run away screaming. She'd run toward help, trusted her instincts, followed orders under fire. The sirens were getting closer now, and Elena could see flashing lights approaching from the main road. In a few minutes, she would be answering questions, giving statements, reliving every detail of the most terrifying experience of her life. But as she stood there beside Marcus, looking at the evidence of violence that had been necessary to protect her, Elena realized something fundamental had shifted inside her. 3 weeks ago, she'd called the police because she couldn't stand by and watch someone get hurt. This morning, she'd learned that sometimes doing the right thing meant accepting help from unexpected places and being willing to trust strangers with your life. The analytical intelligence officer who'd started her morning believing in the safety of distance was gone. The woman standing here now understood that the world could be dangerous, that evil people existed, but that there were also good people willing to risk everything to protect others. As federal agents approached and crime scene tape began to surround the area, Elena caught Marcus's eye one more time. He'd saved her life, but somehow she suspected this wasn't the end of their story. Sometimes, she thought, the most important intelligence comes not from satellite imagery or classified reports, but from looking into someone's eyes and knowing, without question, that they'll stand between you and the darkness. The next several hours passed in a blur of interviews, evidence collection, and paperwork that seemed to stretch endlessly. Elena found herself sitting in an FBI field office, still wearing her running clothes, trying to explain to Agent Sarah Rodriguez how her morning had transformed from routine exercise into a scene from an action thriller. "Miss Martinez," Agent Rodriguez said, her weathered face grave with concern, "I want you to understand the magnitude of what you've stumbled into. These weren't local criminals or opportunistic predators. We've identified two of the attackers through Interpol databases. They were part of an international trafficking organization with connections to organized crime networks spanning 3 countries." Elena felt cold despite the warm San Diego afternoon filtering through the office windows. The scope of what she'd unknowingly challenged was becoming clearer, and it was far more extensive than she'd imagined. "They came all this way just to silence me. Your testimony 3 weeks ago didn't just help us break up a local operation," Agent Rodriguez explained, opening a thick file folder. "It provided crucial evidence that allowed the FBI to connect this trafficking ring to a much larger network. Your description of the van, the license plate numbers, the detailed observations of the perpetrators gave us enough to start unraveling something that had been operating across multiple states for years." The agent paused, studying Elena's face carefully. "These people don't forgive witnesses who cost them millions of dollars and dozens of arrests. The network you helped expose was generating over $50 million annually in illegal revenue." Elena looked through the office window toward the marina where crime scene tape still fluttered in the ocean breeze. Marcus was giving his statement to federal agents across the hall, his calm professionalism evident even through the closed door. She still couldn't fully process that this trained warrior had happened to be in exactly the right place at exactly the right time to save her life. "What happens now?" Elena asked, the question carrying more weight than she'd intended. "Are there others coming?" Agent Rodriguez exchanged a meaningful glance with Agent Thompson, the senior FBI representative who'd arrived from the Los Angeles field office. "That's what we're working to determine. The surviving attacker is in surgery, but when he wakes up, we'll have questions for him. In the meantime, we're strongly recommending that you accept protective custody, at least temporarily." Protective custody. Elena had heard the term in intelligence briefings, but never imagined it applying to her own life. "For how long?" "Until we can determine the full scope of the threat against you," Agent Thompson answered. "The trafficking network these men represented is extensive, well-funded, and highly motivated to prevent further testimony. We need to ensure they don't send additional teams." Elena felt the weight of her changed circumstances settling around her like a heavy cloak. Yesterday, her biggest concern had been whether her intelligence analysis was reaching the right decision-makers in time to prevent threats abroad. Now, federal agents were telling her she might need to disappear from her own life to avoid threats at home. There's something else, Agent Thompson continued, his tone becoming more informal. The man who saved you, Petty Officer Chen, has made an unusual request regarding your security arrangements. Elena looked up sharply. What kind of request? He's asked to be assigned as part of your protective detail. Specifically, he's volunteered to serve as your primary security specialist. Is that normal? Elena asked, feeling confused and something else she couldn't quite identify. She'd known Marcus for only a few hours, but those had been the most intense, life-defining hours of her existence. No, it's not normal, Agent Thompson admitted. Typically, protective details are handled by specialized federal units with specific training for witness protection. But Petty Officer Chen makes a compelling argument. He's already familiar with your case. He's proven he can protect you under extreme circumstances. And frankly, his performance this morning was exceptional even by special operations standards. Agent Rodriguez nodded in agreement. What he did today, taking down 3 armed professionals by himself while protecting a civilian, that's not something you see often, not even from elite special operations personnel. Elena tried to process this information. Marcus wanted to continue protecting her. A man she'd known for only a few hours was willing to put his military career and possibly his life on the line for her safety. The magnitude of that commitment was both overwhelming and oddly comforting. Why would he do that? She asked quietly. You'd have to ask him, Agent Thompson replied. But I will say this. In 20 years of federal law enforcement, I've learned to recognize when someone has strong protective instincts. Your Petty Officer Chen isn't going to let anything happen to you if he can prevent it. Through the office window, Elena could see Marcus finishing his interview with the federal agents. Even at distance, she could tell he was periodically glancing in her direction, checking on her welfare even while dealing with his own interrogation. There was something about that instinctive protectiveness that spoke to her in ways she didn't fully understand. If I agreed to protective custody, what would that mean for my life? Elena asked. My work, my security clearance, my apartment, my responsibilities. Short term, you'll be relocated to a secure facility, Agent Rodriguez explained, her voice sympathetic. Your commanding officers will be briefed on the situation under classified protocols. We'll monitor your apartment and forward any critical communications. Your security clearance will remain active, but you'll be temporarily reassigned to administrative duties that can be performed from a secure location. Elena thought about her work analyzing satellite imagery, tracking potential threats to American forces overseas. She thought about her small apartment with its carefully organized intelligence files and the quiet life she'd built around serving her country from behind a desk. All of that was about to disappear because she tried to help a stranger 3 weeks ago. If I hadn't called the police that day, Elena said quietly, if I just minded my own business, none of this would be happening. If you hadn't called the police that day, Agent Thompson replied firmly, that young woman they were forcing into the van would probably be dead by now, along with dozens of other victims who were rescued because of the information you provided. You did the right thing, Miss Martinez. Don't ever doubt that. Marcus was walking toward their location now, his equipment bag slung over his shoulder. As he approached, Elena could see something in his expression that she hadn't noticed before. Behind the professional competence and military bearing, there was genuine concern for her well-being, a personal investment in her safety that went beyond duty. How are you holding up? He asked when he reached the conference room. I'm told you volunteered to continue protecting me, Elena said, studying his face for answers to questions she wasn't sure how to ask. Marcus glanced at the federal agents, then back to Elena. Those men weren't working alone. Until we know the full extent of the threat against you, I think you need someone watching your back who understands how these people operate. But why you? Elena pressed gently. You don't even know me. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer with the same careful precision he brought to everything else. This morning, you trusted a complete stranger with your life because your instincts told you it was the right choice. Those same instincts are telling me that my job isn't finished yet. Elena felt something shift in her understanding of herself, a recognition that strength wasn't something you either possessed or lacked, but something you discovered when circumstances demanded it. The opportunities Agent Thompson mentioned, she said slowly, they're not just about career advancement, are they? They're about using what I've learned this week in service to something larger. Marcus nodded. The intelligence community is always looking for people who can bridge the gap between analysis and field operations, people who understand both the big picture and the ground truth. What you've been through this week, how you've handled it, proves you can operate in both worlds. Elena stood and walked to the window, watching Marines conduct training exercises on the base parade ground. A week ago, she would have seen that training as abstract preparation for theoretical conflicts. Now she understood it as real preparation for real threats, the kind that could show up in your life without warning and change everything. If I accepted one of those opportunities, Elena said, would it mean more situations like this week? Probably, but with better preparation, better support, better intelligence going in. Marcus joined her at the window. The difference is that next time, you wouldn't be running toward a stranger for help. You'd be trained, equipped, and supported by people who understand exactly what you're facing. Elena considered this. The terrified woman who'd started this journey was gone, replaced by someone who understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite fear. Someone who'd learned that doing the right thing sometimes required accepting risks that seemed impossible to survive. "What about us?" Elena asked quietly, the question carrying weight she hadn't expected. "When the protection detail ends, when I go back to some version of normal life, what happens to this?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I've been wondering the same thing." Elena turned to face him directly, seeing vulnerability in his expression that he rarely allowed others to witness. "This week has changed everything for me. Not just my career or my security situation, but my understanding of what I'm capable of, what I want my life to look like." "What do you want it to look like?" "I want it to include the person who was willing to stand between me and danger when I was a complete stranger. I want it to include someone who sees strength in me that I'm just beginning to recognize in myself." Elena's voice carried a certainty that surprised her. "I want it to include you." Marcus stepped closer, his professional distance finally giving way to something more personal. "Elena, what I feel for you goes beyond protective duty. It started when I saw you running toward me instead of away from danger, trusting your instincts even when you were terrified. It grew when I watched you keep your composure under fire, adapt to impossible circumstances, discover courage you didn't know you possessed." Elena felt her heart racing, but not from fear this time. From possibility, from recognition that what had begun as a life-threatening crisis had evolved into something neither of them had expected to find. "So what do we do about it?" she asked. "We see where it leads," Marcus replied, reaching for her hand. "We take it one day at a time, figure out how to build something together that honors both our duties and our feelings." Elena squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses from years of military training, the steady strength that had kept her alive through the darkest week of her life. "I'd like that." 6 months later, Elena Martinez stood in a briefing room at CIA headquarters in Langley. But she was no longer the same woman who'd been analyzing satellite imagery from the safety of a desk. The trafficking network that had targeted her was completely dismantled now, with prosecutions completed in 7 countries and over 300 victims rescued through the intelligence network her original testimony had helped uncover. But more than that, Elena herself had changed in ways that continued to surprise her. The woman who'd once viewed violence as abstract data points now understood the weight of life-and-death decisions, the the complexity of protecting innocence in a dangerous world, the courage required to act when action might cost everything. She was no longer Naval Intelligence Officer Elena Martinez, analyst. She was CIA Operations Officer Elena Martinez, field specialist. The transition had been challenging, requiring months of additional training, psychological evaluation, and fieldwork preparation. But every test had confirmed what Marcus and Agent Thompson had recognized that day at Naval Base Coronado. She possessed rare capabilities that were valuable in ways she'd never imagined. "Your first assignment," Director Sarah Chen explained, passing Elena a classified folder, "involves a human trafficking investigation in Eastern Europe. The perpetrators are using sophisticated networks to move victims across international borders, and traditional intelligence gathering has been insufficient to penetrate their operations." Elena opened the folder, scanning the preliminary intelligence reports. The scope and sophistication of the operation was staggering, but she found herself analyzing it with calm professionalism rather than the overwhelming fear such information might have caused 6 months ago. "What's the operational approach?" she asked. "Embedded intelligence gathering. You'll be working with a joint task force that includes CIA operations officers, military special operations personnel, and international law enforcement agencies. Your role will be to gather intelligence from within the organization itself." Elena felt a familiar chill, but it was different now. Not the paralyzing fear she'd experienced at the marina, but the sharp awareness that came with accepting dangerous but necessary work. Timeline. Deployment in 3 weeks. Training starts Monday. Director Chen studied Elena's face carefully. "I should mention that your personal security specialist has requested assignment to the support team for this operation." Elena looked up sharply. "Marcus." "Petty Officer Chen has been reassigned to a joint CIA-Navy Special Operations Unit. His official designation is Tactical Support Specialist, but his actual role will be ensuring your safety during high-risk intelligence gathering." The director's expression was neutral, professional. "I understand there are personal considerations involved in this arrangement." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. 6 months of navigating the complex relationship between professional duty and personal feelings had taught both her and Marcus how to maintain operational effectiveness while acknowledging what existed between them. They'd learned to compartmentalize, to separate mission requirements from personal concerns, but never to pretend those personal concerns didn't exist. "Yes, there are personal considerations," Elena said honestly, "but our professional performance has never been compromised by them. I've observed, which is why this arrangement has been approved." Director Chen closed her own folder and looked at Elena seriously. "Miss Martinez, what happened to you 6 months ago was traumatic and dangerous, but it also revealed capabilities that are rare in the intelligence community. You've proven you can maintain analytical objectivity under extreme pressure, adapt to rapidly changing threat environments, and work effectively with special operations personnel in life-threatening situations." Elena thought about the scared woman who'd run toward a stranger for help, about the moment she'd accepted Marcus's rifle, about all the ways her understanding of herself had evolved since that terrifying morning. "I understand the risks," she said quietly, "and I understand why this work matters." "Good, because the networks you'll be investigating don't just traffic humans. They're connected to weapons smuggling, international terrorism, and state-sponsored criminal activities that threaten American interests worldwide." Director Chen stood, signaling the end of the briefing. "Your willingness to take that phone call 6 months ago started something much larger than you realized. Now you have the opportunity to see it through to completion." That evening, Elena sat in the apartment she now shared with Marcus, reviewing the classified materials for her upcoming assignment. The space reflected their joined lives. Her intelligence analysis equipment alongside his tactical gear, her books on international relations next to his military history collection, evidence of two people who'd learned to build something together from the most unlikely beginning. Eastern Europe, Marcus said, reading over her shoulder as he returned from his own briefing. Challenging operational environment. But familiar territory, Elena replied, nodding the similarities between this new assignment and the network they'd confronted 6 months ago. Similar methodology, similar organizational structure, probably connected to the same people we helped bring down. Marcus settled beside her on the couch, his presence as comforting now as it had been protective that first morning. How are you feeling about it? Elena considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified by the prospect of deliberately placing herself in danger to gather intelligence on violent criminals. Now, she felt something different, awareness of the risks, respect for the complexity of the mission, but also confidence in her abilities and trust in the people who would be supporting her. Ready, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I'm ready. The woman I met at the marina wouldn't have been ready for this kind of assignment, Marcus observed, his tone thoughtful rather than critical. The woman you met at the marina didn't know what she was capable of until someone handed her a rifle and told her to trust her instincts. Elena leaned against his shoulder, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She needed to discover that strength existed before she could learn to use it. And now, Elena thought about the training she'd completed, the psychological evaluations she'd passed, the fieldwork exercises that had proven she could maintain cover under pressure, gather intelligence in hostile environments, and make split-second decisions that might determine mission success or failure. Now I know that courage isn't something you either have or don't have. It's something you choose moment by moment when the situation demands it. Elena turned to look at Marcus directly. I chose to run toward you that morning because every instinct told me you could help. You chose to stand between me and danger because you'd sworn to protect people who needed protection. We've been choosing courage together ever since. Marcus smiled, the expression carrying warmth and pride, and something deeper that had grown between them through months of learning to trust each other with more than just physical safety. So, we continue choosing it together. In 3 weeks, I'm going to be gathering intelligence on people who destroy lives for profit. You're going to be making sure I survive long enough to use that intelligence to stop them. Elena felt the weight of what they were accepting, but also the rightness of it. It's dangerous, it's complicated, and success isn't guaranteed. But it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do, Elena agreed. As they prepared for bed that night, following security routines that had become second nature, Elena reflected on the woman she'd been 6 months ago and the woman she was becoming. The transformation hadn't been easy or comfortable, but it had been necessary. Some people lived their entire lives without discovering what they were truly capable of. She'd been forced to discover it in a single morning, but that discovery had led to everything meaningful that had followed. Marcus, she said as they conducted their nightly security check, a ritual that had evolved from necessity into habit. When you handed me your rifle that morning, what did you think would happen to us? Marcus paused in checking the window locks, considering her question with the careful thought he brought to everything important. Honestly, I thought we'd survive the immediate threat, give our statements to the authorities, and never see each other again. I thought you'd go back to your intelligence work, I'd go back to my SEAL team, and that would be the end of it. But when I saw how you handled yourself under pressure, how you trusted your instincts, how you found strength when you needed it most, I started thinking maybe the end of the immediate crisis didn't have to be the end of our story. Marcus turned to face her directly. I started thinking maybe we discovered something worth keeping. Elena felt the truth of that settle in her chest like a warm weight. What they'd discovered went beyond romantic attraction or professional compatibility. They discovered a partnership that made both of them stronger, more capable, more willing to take necessary risks in service to something larger than themselves. Tomorrow I start preparing for the most dangerous assignment of my career, Elena said, and somehow the idea doesn't terrify me the way it should. Because you know you're not facing it alone. Because I know that courage is contagious, Elena corrected gently. You showed me what it looked like to choose protection over safety, duty over comfort. Now I get to show others what it looks like to choose truth over security, justice over convenience. As they settled into bed, Elena thought about the chain of choices that had brought them to this point. Her choice to call the police 3 weeks before they met. Her choice to run toward Marcus instead of away from danger. His choice to position himself between her and threat. Their choice to build something together from the crisis that had brought them together. Elena, Marcus said quietly in the darkness, whatever happens on this next assignment, whatever we face, I want you to know that protecting you that morning was the most important thing I've ever done. Not because of the tactical success or the lives saved, but because it brought you into my life. Elena turned toward him, seeing in the dim light the man who'd been willing to risk everything for a stranger and had somehow become the center of her transformed world. And trusting you with my life that morning was the smartest decision I've ever made. Not just because you kept me alive, but because you helped me discover who I really was underneath all my fears. 3 weeks later, Elena Martinez sat in the back of an unmarked van in the outskirts of Prague, conducting final equipment checks before beginning the most dangerous assignment of her life. But she was no longer the frightened analyst who'd run toward a stranger for protection. She was a trained operative, prepared and supported and confident in her abilities. Through her earpiece, she could hear Marcus's voice providing tactical updates from the support team position. His presence, even at a distance, remained a source of strength and certainty. They'd learned over the past months how to work together professionally while maintaining the personal connection that made their partnership so effective. All teams in position, the operation commander's voice crackled through the communication system. Phoenix, you are cleared to begin infiltration. Phoenix, Elena's operational code name, chosen because it represented transformation through trial, emergence from destruction as something stronger and more capable. She keyed her microphone, her voice steady and professional. Phoenix copies, beginning approach. As Elena stepped out of the van and walked toward the building where she would spend the next several weeks gathering intelligence on people who traded in human misery, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. A terrified woman running toward help had become an operative walking deliberately toward danger in service to justice. The scared elementary school teacher from the original story would never have imagined such a transformation was possible. But Elena Martinez, CIA operations officer, understood something that teacher had never learned. Sometimes the most important growth happens not in spite of our fears, but because we choose to act despite them. Phoenix, you have Overwatch. Marcus's voice came through her earpiece as she approached the target building. You are not alone out there. Elena smiled slightly, feeling the truth of those words in ways that extended far beyond operational support. She keyed her microphone one final time before entering the building and beginning her mission. Copy Overwatch. Phoenix is moving to contact. As she disappeared into the shadows of the building, Elena carried with her everything she'd learned about courage, trust, and the unexpected ways that life could transform when you chose to run toward help instead of away from danger. The frightened woman who'd started this story was gone, replaced by someone who understood that strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to serve something greater than your own safety. Sometimes the most important transformations begin with a single choice to trust a stranger with your life. Sometimes that trust becomes the foundation for everything meaningful that follows. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, the person who saves your life becomes the person who helps you discover who you were always meant to be. The scared woman who had started a morning jog was gone forever. In her place stood someone who understood that dignity doesn't announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic speeches. Sometimes, dignity simply acts, quietly, courageously, and without fanfare, when action is what the world needs most. Shift in her chest, a recognition that this wasn't just about professional duty or military obligations. There was something personal here, something that Marcus was willing to risk his career to pursue. "I accept," she said quietly, the words carrying more weight than a simple agreement to protective custody. She was accepting trust, accepting help, accepting the possibility that her life might never be the same again. But as she looked into Marcus's steady green eyes, Elena realized that maybe, just maybe, different didn't necessarily mean worse. The safe house turned out to be a modest two-story home in a quiet residential neighborhood about 45 minutes north of San Diego. To anyone passing by, it would have appeared to be a typical suburban family home, complete with a well-maintained lawn and cheerful blue shutters. But Elena quickly noticed the details that marked it as something entirely different. Reinforced windows with impact-resistant glass, multiple deadbolts on every door, and a security system that appeared more sophisticated than anything she'd encountered in civilian settings. Marcus had been assigned as her primary protection specialist, which meant he was essentially living in the house with her for the foreseeable future. The arrangement felt surreal in ways that Elena's intelligence training hadn't prepared her for. 4 days ago, she'd been a single naval officer living alone, worrying about classified reports and morning fitness routines. Now she was sharing living space with a Navy SEAL who checked every window lock twice before settling in for the night. "This is strange, isn't it?" Elena said on their third evening in the safe house. They were sitting in the living room after dinner, the blinds drawn against the outside world, trying to find some sense of normalcy in a completely abnormal situation. Marcus looked up from the tactical manual he was reviewing. Which part? The hiding from international criminals part or the living with a stranger part? Both, I suppose. Elena managed a small laugh, the first genuine one since the marina incident. A week ago, if someone had told me I'd be in protective custody with a Navy SEAL, I would have thought they were describing a movie plot. A week ago, if someone had told me I'd be protecting a naval intelligence officer from human traffickers, I would have thought the same thing. Marcus set aside his manual and looked at her seriously. But here we are. Over the past 3 days, Elena had learned more about Marcus Chen than she knew about some people she'd worked with for months. He was 32, originally from Seattle, had been in the Navy for 12 years. His father had been a police officer, his mother a nurse. He joined the military right out of high school because he wanted to serve his country and protect people who couldn't protect themselves. The parallels to her own motivations for joining naval intelligence were striking. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said, setting down the intelligence brief she'd been reading. "During the marina incident, what were you thinking when you positioned yourself between me and those men?" Marcus considered the question carefully, the same methodical approach he brought to everything. "I was thinking that you deserved a fighting chance. Those men weren't planning to leave any witnesses, but beyond that," he paused, seeming to weigh his words. "I took an oath when I joined the Navy, to support and defend the Constitution, to protect American citizens against all enemies, but there's something deeper than the oath." "What do you mean?" "I was raised to believe that when you see someone in trouble, you help them. It doesn't matter if they're a stranger, doesn't matter if it's dangerous. You help because it's the right thing to do." Marcus's voice carried quiet conviction. "You ran toward me that morning because you believed I might be able to help. I positioned myself between you and danger because I knew I could help." Elena felt something warm unfold in her chest. She'd spent her entire career believing in those same values, serving others, protecting people from threats they might never even know existed. But she'd never imagined it might require the kind of physical courage Marcus had demonstrated. "Agent Rodriguez mentioned you requested this assignment specifically," she said quietly. "You could have gone back to your regular duties with SEAL Team 5. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard before. 3 years ago, I lost someone I was supposed to protect, a fellow service member in Afghanistan. I made a tactical decision that put him in unnecessary danger, and he didn't make it home. Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. I'm sorry. I joined the SEALs because I wanted to protect people, but that day, my protection wasn't enough. Marcus looked directly at her, and Elena saw vulnerability there that he usually kept carefully hidden. When I saw you running toward me this morning, saw those men coming after you, I knew I had a chance to do what I'm actually trained for, to make sure someone who deserves protection gets it. The weight of his words settled between them like a bridge neither had expected to build. Elena realized that Marcus wasn't just protecting her because it was his job. He was protecting her because losing her would mean failing someone again, and he couldn't live with that possibility. What happens when this is over? Elena asked. When they catch all the people involved and I don't need protection anymore. I go back to my unit. You go back to analyzing intelligence. We return to our normal lives. Marcus's tone was matter-of-fact, but Elena thought she heard something else underneath it, something that sounded like reluctance. Do you want to go back to your normal life? Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and Elena saw something shift in his expression, something that spoke of possibilities neither of them had expected to consider. I'm starting to think my normal life was missing something important. Before Elena could ask what he meant, Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming message. His expression immediately shifted to high alert as he read the text, and Elena recognized the change in his demeanor from their time at the marina. What is it? She asked, already knowing from his posture that it wasn't good news. Agent Thompson, the surviving attacker, regained consciousness and started talking. Marcus was already moving toward his equipment bag, his movements sharp and purposeful. They've identified 2 more teams that were sent to find you. One team is already in San Diego. Elena felt ice flood her veins. More teams. The good news is that we know they're coming. The better news is that they have no idea where you are. Marcus was checking his weapons with practiced efficiency, but Elena could see the concern in his eyes. But we're not taking any chances. We're moving to a secondary location tonight. Another safe house. Marcus's grin was sharp and determined, carrying an edge that reminded Elena exactly what kind of warrior was protecting her. How do you feel about spending a few days on a military base? Because I think it's time these people learned what happens when they threaten someone under Navy protection. As Elena watched Marcus prepare for what was clearly going to be another dangerous confrontation, she realized that the frightened woman who'd started this journey was continuing to evolve. She was still afraid. Anyone rational would be. But underneath the fear was something new and unexpected. Trust in Marcus's abilities, confidence in her own strength, and a growing understanding that sometimes the right fight was worth the risk. Marcus, she said as he shouldered his gear bag, when this is really over, when all the threats are eliminated and I don't need protection anymore, I want you to know something. He paused, looking at her with those intense green eyes that had first given her hope at the marina. I'm glad it was you at that barrier. I'm glad you were the one who stood between me and those men, and I'm glad you didn't let me face this alone. Marcus's expression softened, and for a moment the professional warrior disappeared, replaced by a man who cared deeply about the woman he was protecting. Elena, facing things alone is over for you. Whatever comes next, whatever these people try to do, you're not handling it by yourself anymore. Elena felt something fundamental shift inside her chest, a recognition that this arrangement had become about much more than professional duty or temporary protection. She was beginning to understand that some partnerships, forged under extreme circumstances, created bonds that extended far beyond the crisis that brought them together. As they prepared to move to Naval Base Coronado, Elena realized she was no longer thinking about when her normal life would resume. She was thinking about what kind of life she wanted to build when the danger finally passed. And increasingly, that imagined future included the man who'd been willing to risk everything to keep her safe. The gates of Naval Base Coronado had never looked more welcoming. As their unmarked vehicle approached the checkpoint, Elena felt some of the tension she'd been carrying for days begin to ease. Behind those gates lay not just physical security, but the full protective power of the United States Navy. Any additional teams sent to silence her would find themselves facing not just Marcus, but an entire military installation staffed with people trained for exactly this kind of threat. "Feel safer already?" Marcus asked, noting the change in her posture as they passed through the security checkpoint. "Significantly," Elena admitted, watching Marine guards with assault rifles take positions around their vehicle. "Though I have to say, a week ago I never imagined I'd be thinking of military security as a relief rather than just part of my job." They were housed in VIP quarters normally reserved for visiting dignitaries, a small apartment-style unit with reinforced walls and discreet but comprehensive surveillance. More importantly, it was surrounded by Marines who took a very personal interest in protecting naval personnel from foreign threats. The second team made their move yesterday evening, Agent Thompson reported during their first briefing in the secure facility. "They attempted to infiltrate the area around your previous safe house location." Elena felt her blood chill. What happened? "They found empty houses and a coordinated response from 3 different federal agencies," Thompson replied with grim satisfaction. "All 4 men are now in federal custody, and they're providing very interesting information about their organization." Marcus leaned forward in his chair, his tactical mind clearly analyzing the implications. "How many more teams are out there?" "Based on interrogations, we believe there were only the 2 additional teams. The original plan was apparently to grab Miss Martinez quickly and quietly before federal protection could be arranged." Thompson consulted his notes. "Your encounter at the marina disrupted their timeline significantly. After that, they were improvising, trying to salvage an operation that had already gone badly wrong." Elena felt a strange mixture of relief and residual fear. "So it's over." "The immediate physical threat appears to be neutralized," Thompson said carefully. "But we're still working to understand the full scope of the organization that targeted you. The trafficking network was apparently much larger than we initially realized, with financial connections that extend into legitimate businesses and political organizations." "Meaning?" Marcus's question was sharp, professional. "Meaning that while Miss Martinez is no longer in immediate physical danger, there may be ongoing efforts to discredit her testimony, challenge the evidence she provided, or otherwise undermine the prosecutions that resulted from her witness statement." Elena sat back in her chair, processing the implications. Even when the immediate threat to her life was resolved, the consequences of that phone call 3 weeks ago would continue to ripple through her existence. Her quiet life as an intelligence analyst was gone forever, replaced by something she couldn't yet fully understand. "How long before I can return to normal duties?" she asked. "That depends on several factors," Thompson replied. "Your testimony will be crucial in multiple federal trials. There will be ongoing security considerations, though nothing like what we've dealt with this week. And frankly, your profile within the intelligence community has changed significantly." "Changed how?" Agent Thompson exchanged glances with Marcus, then looked back at Elena seriously. "Miss Martinez, what you've been through this week, the way you've handled yourself under extreme pressure, hasn't gone unnoticed. There are people in Washington who are very interested in your potential for different kinds of assignments." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with air conditioning. "What kinds of assignments?" "The kind where your experience with international criminal organizations, your proven ability to maintain composure under direct threat, and your demonstrated capacity for working with special operations personnel might be valuable assets." Marcus's posture had shifted to something Elena recognized as protective alertness. Are you recruiting her? I'm informing her that opportunities exist, Thompson replied carefully. Miss Martinez has demonstrated capabilities that are rare and valuable. If she's interested in applying those capabilities in service to her country in new ways, there are people who would like to discuss possibilities with her. Elena looked between Thompson and Marcus, trying to understand what was actually being offered. Her career as a satellite imagery analyst had been satisfying but distant from real-world applications. This week had shown her what it felt like to be directly involved in protecting people, directly confronting threats, directly making a difference in ways she could see and touch. I need time to think about this, Elena said finally. Of course, there's no timeline or pressure. Just know that your options have expanded considerably. Thompson gathered his papers and stood to leave. In the meantime, you'll remain here until we're completely certain the threat is eliminated. Petty Officer Chen will continue as your security specialist until we've verified that all members of the trafficking organization are accounted for. After Thompson left, Elena and Marcus sat in comfortable silence, each processing the implications of the briefing in their own way. Outside their window, Elena could see Marines conducting routine patrols, FA-18 Hornets practicing carrier landings, the familiar rhythm of military life continuing around them. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked eventually. "I'm thinking that a week ago, the most dangerous thing in my world was making sure intelligence reports reached the right people on time," Elena replied. "Now I'm being offered assignments I don't even fully understand, and the idea doesn't terrify me the way it should." "What do you mean?" Elena turned to face him directly. "I mean that before this week I thought courage was something other people had. People like you, people who volunteered for dangerous assignments and ran toward gunfire. But sitting here now, I realize that I ran toward gunfire too. I trusted a stranger with my life, followed orders under fire, and somehow found strength I didn't know I possessed." Marcus studied her face carefully. "You did more than that. You made split-second decisions that saved your own life. You kept your composure during a firefight. You adapted to circumstances that would have broken most people." "I had help," Elena said softly. "Everyone needs help. The question is whether you're capable of accepting it when it's offered, and whether you can rise to the occasion when help isn't enough." Marcus's voice carried conviction she was learning to trust. "You did both." Elena felt some things.